6 months ago, he was still driving himself to the market. At 74, he made his own breakfast, paid his own bills, and insisted on carrying the groceries into the house without help. Then came a minor infection, a short stay in the hospital, and a return home that did not feel like a return at all. Within weeks, he stopped using the stairs. He no longer cooked. He needed someone nearby when he walked to the bathroom. His family kept saying the same thing. It all happened so suddenly. But perhaps it was not sudden. Perhaps the illness did not create all of his weakness. Perhaps it only revealed what had been quietly gathering for years. A little less muscle, a little less balance, fewer proper meals, more time alone, and small warning signs everyone hoped would pass. Buddhist wisdom teaches that nothing arises from a single cause. A flower does not bloom because of the seed alone. It also needs soil, rain, sunlight, time, and countless unseen conditions. Decline is often the same. One small loss supports another until a single illness, fall, or sleepless week makes everything visible at once. After 70, independence is rarely stolen in one dramatic moment. It is usually worn away quietly. Today we will look at 6 silent changes that can weaken your ability to live on your own, and the simple, compassionate actions that may help you protect it before the next unexpected wind arrives. 1. The illness heals, but the person grows weaker. The first silent change often begins in the very place we expect to make us well again. A 76-year-old woman enters the hospital with pneumonia. Her breathing is labored, her body is exhausted, and the infection has taken more from her than anyone first realizes. The doctors treat her lungs. The medicine works. Her oxygen improves. After several days, the discharge papers say that she is recovering well. And yet, when she returns home, she is not the same woman who entered. For most of her hospital stay, she has been lying in bed. She has eaten very little because she had no appetite. She has slept in fragments interrupted by lights, sounds, checks, and unfamiliar voices. Her glasses were left in a drawer. Her hearing aids were not worn. Morning and evening began to blur together. By the time she comes home, the pneumonia is better, but standing feels frightening. Her legs tremble when she rises. She reaches for the nearest chair. One difficult attempt becomes a reason to sit longer. Sitting longer makes her weaker. Weakness increases her fear of falling. Fear keeps her from moving, and the circle begins to close. This is how strength can disappear without anyone noticing the exact moment it was lost. In older adults, the body can weaken quickly when it is not used. Poor sleep, too little food, and not enough fluid can deepen that weakness. Some people also develop sudden confusion in the hospital. They may not know where they are, what day it is, or why their family is standing beside them. They may become restless, frightened, unusually quiet or distant. Families sometimes fear that dementia has arrived overnight. But sudden confusion can have many causes, and it must be brought to the attention of the medical team. It should never be dismissed as simply getting old. Buddhist wisdom reminds us that the body and mind are not two separate things. When the body becomes still, the mind can lose its orientation. When the mind becomes frightened or confused, the body becomes even less willing to move. Healing one organ does not always mean the whole person has recovered. This is why compassion must become practical. Bring the glasses, the hearing aids, and the dentures if they are needed. Help your loved one recognize the day, the time, and the place. Ask the care team what movement is safe today. Support food and fluids according to medical guidance. And after discharge, do not assume that being home means the danger has passed. Compassion is not merely sitting beside someone and saying, "Rest." Sometimes compassion is asking, What can safely be used today so it will not be lost tomorrow? Yet the hospital does not create every weakness. Often it exposes a reserve that had already been disappearing long before the admission. 2. The body quietly stops doing what it once could. The second silent change is more difficult to see because it does not always appear on the scale. A man may weigh exactly what he weighed 10 years ago. His clothes still fit. His face looks much the same. Nothing about him seems dramatically different. But now he uses both hands to push himself out of a chair. He no longer carries the grocery bags from the car. He climbs the stairs slowly, stopping halfway to catch his breath. He begins choosing restaurants with nearby parking and avoids places that require a long walk. His family sees the same number on the scale and assumes that his body has remained the same. But weight can stay steady while muscle is quietly replaced by fat. The body may look unchanged while its strength, balance, and ability to recover are slowly disappearing. And when a movement is no longer practiced, the body gradually forgets how to perform it. A path does not disappear in a single night. It disappears because no one walks upon it. First, the grass grows at the edges. Then the stones vanish. Eventually, the path becomes difficult to find. The body is much the same. Standing without using the hands is a path. Climbing a step is a path. Carrying something of moderate weight, balancing safely, and walking beyond the front door are all paths that must be used if they are to remain open. Weakness leads to less movement. Less movement creates more weakness. Soon the person is not only unable to do certain things, he begins arranging his life so that he never has to try. Buddhist practice speaks of right effort and the middle way. One extreme is to fight aging as though the body must remain young forever. The other is to surrender and say, "At my age, nothing will make a difference." Wisdom lies between them. It means doing enough to maintain and gently rebuild what can still be strengthened. It means consistency rather than intensity, and working with the body you have now instead of punishing it for no longer being 30. Notice the ordinary signs. Can you rise from a chair without pushing with your hands? Has your walking speed changed? Can you balance safely for a brief moment? These observations are not a diagnosis. If balance is uncertain, use support and do not test yourself alone. Any clear change should be discussed with a doctor or rehabilitation professional. Muscle also needs two things: a reason to remain and the material to rebuild. Movement provides the signal. Food provides the material. A breakfast of coffee and biscuits and a lunch of thin soup may feel light and healthy, but the legs may not be receiving what they need. The goal is not to eat excessively. It is to eat adequately and wisely, including enough protein when medically appropriate. Anyone with kidney disease or other relevant conditions should seek individual guidance. Caring for the body is not attachment to youth. It is gratitude for the life that still moves through you. Ask yourself, what movement have I stopped doing this year? Is it truly unsafe, or has it simply become difficult? And who could help me practice it again safely? But the legs are not weakened by inactivity alone. Sometimes they are weakened by a life that has slowly become too empty. 3. Isolation begins in the heart and ends in the body. The third silent change often begins with an empty chair. After her husband died, a woman continued cooking 2 portions each evening. For weeks, she set the table as she always had. 1 plate for herself, 1 plate for the person who was no longer there. Then one evening she stopped. Cooking a full meal for one began to feel pointless, Dinner became bread, a few biscuits, or a cup of tea. She went outside less often because there was no one waiting to walk with her. She saw fewer people. She moved less. Her appetite faded, her legs weakened, and the front door remained closed for longer each day. Isolation does not only make a person sad, it quietly changes the habits that keep a person strong. Less connection can mean less motivation to cook. Poorer meals can lead to less strength. Less strength makes leaving the house more difficult. Less walking weakens balance. Weaker balance creates fear of falling. Fear leads to more time indoors, and more time indoors deepens the isolation. Loneliness rarely harms the body through one dramatic act. It works through the plate that is no longer filled, the legs that are no longer used, and the door that is no longer opened. Many people believe independence means needing no one. But Buddhist wisdom offers a different view. Independence is not the absence of support. It is the ability to remain dignified and engaged within a web of wise support. Buddhism does not glorify isolation. Even monks and nuns depend upon teachers, fellow practitioners, community, and those who support their daily lives. No one remains strong entirely alone. Sometimes the person who protects your independence is the person who notices when you do not arrive. This is why the right activity is not merely something to pass the time. It has a schedule. Other people are involved. You have a real role. If you do not appear, someone notices. It may be volunteering, joining a walking group, attending a spiritual community, helping with a grandchild, taking a class, keeping a weekly phone call, or caring for an animal if you are able. What matters is that your presence has a place. Isolation can also begin through hearing loss. Imagine a father sitting at a dinner table with 8 family members. Everyone laughs, but he cannot follow the story. He smiles when they smile. After several gatherings, he stops asking questions. His family begins to think he no longer cares. But he was not withdrawing from the family. The family's world had become harder for him to enter. Silence chosen with awareness can be peaceful. Silence imposed by a world you can no longer hear can become a prison. If you often ask others to repeat themselves, avoid noisy gatherings, or keep raising the television volume, consider having your hearing checked. Hearing aids are not a humiliation. Families can also help by speaking clearly, facing the person directly, and reducing background noise. Yet even a person who moves, eats well, and remains connected can be quietly weakened by something sitting in plain sight on the kitchen table. 4. When more treatment becomes another burden. The 4th silent change may already be sitting on the kitchen table. There is one pill for blood pressure, another for joint pain, and another to protect the stomach from the pain medicine. There is something to help with sleep, an over-the-counter tablet for allergies, a bottle of vitamins, and perhaps an herbal remedy recommended by a friend. Each one began for a reasonable purpose. No single prescription seemed alarming. No doctor intended harm. But after several years, the person begins waking with heavy eyes. They feel dizzy when standing. They move less because they are tired. Their balance becomes uncertain. Constipation, dry mouth, and difficulty concentrating become part of daily life. The family looks at these changes and says, "This is what happens with age." Sometimes it is. But sometimes what appears to be aging is partly the combined burden of many treatments acting upon the same body. A side effect may be mistaken for a new illness. A new medicine is then added to treat the new symptom. That medicine creates another difficulty, and another solution follows. Each decision may make sense when viewed alone. The problem is that no one has stepped back to examine the entire chain. Buddhist wisdom calls us toward right view, the willingness to see not only one object, but the conditions surrounding it. Wisdom does not only ask, does this help one problem? It also asks, what other conditions does this create? Nothing acts in isolation. A treatment that eases pain may also affect alertness. A medicine that helps someone sleep may influence balance the next morning. Something that calms one symptom may reduce movement, appetite, or concentration. This does not mean medicine is the enemy. Medicines save lives. They reduce suffering, control disease, and preserve independence. Taking several medications does not automatically mean something is wrong. The real question is whether every medicine is still necessary, appropriate, and working safely alongside the others. That question should never be answered alone. Do not stop a prescribed medicine because of something you hear in a video. Some medications can be dangerous when discontinued suddenly. Instead, take part in your care with attention. Make a complete list of everything you use: prescriptions, over-the-counter medicines, vitamins, supplements, herbs, sleep aids, and anything taken only occasionally. Bring the list or the actual containers to your doctor or pharmacist. Then ask 4 simple questions. What is this medicine treating? Do I still need it now? Could it be contributing to any symptoms I am experiencing? And if a change is appropriate, what is the safest way to make it? Asking a question is not rejecting medicine. It is participating wisely in your own care. The most dangerous changes, however, are often not hidden in a prescription bottle. They are hidden in ordinary rooms and ordinary routines. FIVE. The small signs everyone learns to ignore. The 5th silent change is often hidden in plain sight. An older man begins touching the edge of the table as he crosses the living room. He does it so naturally that no one notices. When his daughter asks whether he is all right, he smiles and says he is simply tired. Months later, he stops going anywhere that requires a long walk. He avoids stairs, unfamiliar streets, and evening drives. He says he no longer enjoys going out, but in truth, he has quietly reorganized his life around something he can no longer do with confidence. This is not always stubbornness. Many older people hide small difficulties because they fear what honesty may cost them. They fear losing the car, losing control of their decisions, being forced to leave home, or being treated as incapable. A small admission can feel like the first step toward losing freedom. Mindfulness is not only noticing what is happening in the mind, it is also having the courage to notice what is changing in daily life. In Buddhist practice, heedfulness does not mean becoming frightened by every symptom. It means seeing clearly, refusing denial, and responding before a small problem becomes a crisis. Sometimes the first sign is clothing that has become loose or a face that looks thinner. Unplanned weight loss should not be celebrated without asking why. Sometimes a person who once dressed carefully begins wearing the same clothes for several days. This may reflect exhaustion, depression, pain, or changes in thinking. It should not be judged, but neither should it be ignored. Sometimes the refrigerator tells the story: expired food, nothing fresh, repeated purchases of the same item, or almost nothing to eat. Sometimes unopened letters and unpaid bills begin to gather. Complex tasks can become difficult before obvious memory problems appear. Sometimes life itself grows smaller. No night driving, no new places, only familiar routes, and increasing avoidance of stairs or crowds. Not every change means illness, but every unexplained change deserves understanding. Burned pans, cuts, or kitchen accidents may point to changes in vision, attention, sensation, or memory. And any fall matters. A fall without an injury is not always proof that everything is fine. It may be an early rehearsal for something more serious. Balance, eyesight medication, lighting loose rugs, footwear, and leg strength may all need review. Most importantly, sudden confusion should never be dismissed as normal aging. Infection, dehydration, medication, or another condition may be involved, and prompt medical assessment is needed. Families must respond with compassion, not control. Not, "You cannot do anything anymore, but I have noticed this is harder. Can we find out why?" Not, "I will decide everything now, but what support would help you remain in charge?" To notice someone's weakness without taking away their dignity is one of the most difficult forms of compassion. All of these signs point toward one deeper change: the gradual loss of the body's ability to recover when life delivers an unexpected blow. 6. The reserve is disappearing before the crisis arrives. The sixth silent change is the deepest one of all. It is not age alone that makes a person fragile. What matters is how much reserve remains when illness, grief, surgery, or a fall arrives. A storm does not extinguish every lamp. It extinguishes the lamp whose oil has grown low, whose wick has been neglected, and whose flame has been left unprotected. The oil is nourishment, strength, sleep, and water. The wick is the pattern of habits repeated each day. The glass around the flame is a safe home, good lighting, steady flooring, and the tools that reduce unnecessary risk. The hands protecting the lamp belong to family, community, and skilled medical care. And the wind is everything we cannot fully predict: an infection, an operation, a fall, or the loss of someone we love. When we are younger, a sleepless night or a bout of influenza may leave us exhausted for a few days, but the body often returns quickly. When reserve has grown low, the same event may lead to weakness, confusion, a fall, or the sudden loss of independence. The illness may not be more severe. The body simply has less room to absorb it. This is why frailty is not the same as being old. Some people reach 90 with remarkable strength and resilience. Others become vulnerable before 70. A birth date does not reveal the whole condition of a human body. Unplanned weight loss, exhaustion, weakness, slower walking, and very low activity can all suggest that reserve is declining. None of these signs should be used to label or condemn a person. They are invitations to look more carefully. Buddhist wisdom teaches impermanence, but impermanence is not the same as helplessness. Acceptance says, "This body will change." Resignation says, "Nothing I do matters." Buddhist wisdom does not confuse the two. We cannot guarantee freedom from illness. We cannot control genetics, poverty, injury, disease, living conditions, or every event that shapes a life. Weakness is not proof that someone failed. Health is not proof of superior karma. Suffering should never be turned into blame. But while we cannot control every outcome, we can influence some of the conditions that meet us when difficulty arrives. Strength may be improved, nutrition may be corrected, a dangerous medicine combination may be reviewed, a home may be made safer, hearing may be supported, isolation may be interrupted. Early action may preserve choices that would otherwise disappear. The goal is not to live forever. The goal is to remain able to participate in your own life for as long as possible, to stand, choose, connect, and receive help without surrendering your dignity. The question then is not whether the wind will ever come. It will. The question is whether we are tending the lamp while the evening is still calm. Independence is not protected by one dramatic decision made once a year. It is built in ordinary mornings. Begin by sitting up slowly. Notice whether the room feels steady or whether dizziness appears. Drink water if it is appropriate for your health. Open the curtains and let daylight remind the body that a new day has begun. At breakfast, do not ask only what is easy, ask what will help me remain strong. Coffee and something sweet may satisfy hunger for a moment, but the body also needs real nourishment. Take prescribed medicines as directed. Do not add, stop, or change them without professional guidance. During the day, give the body a reason to remain capable. Practice one safe strength movement. Walk according to your ability. Wear the glasses or hearing aids that help you stay connected to the world. Step outside if you can. Let sunlight, movement, and human voices enter the day. And have somewhere to be. A class, a walk, a place of worship, a volunteer role, a regular phone call, a person who expects your presence. Inside the home, protect the path you walk each day. Remove loose rugs and electrical cords. Improve the lighting between the bedroom and bathroom. Keep frequently used objects within easy reach. Check handrails, footwear, and anything that helps you move safely. Do not allow embarrassment to keep you from using a cane, walker, hearing aid, or other support. From time to time, review what is changing. Notice your weight, walking, balance, vision, hearing, and medication list. Speak honestly about new difficulties before they become emergencies. Now place your hands gently on your knees and take one slow breath. This body is changing. This body is still worthy of care. I do not need to fear every change. I only need to stop turning away from what asks for attention. Then choose one action, not 10. Make one appointment. Remove one rug. Call one person. Improve one meal. Practice one movement. Speak one symptom aloud. The most powerful habit after 70 may not be exercise, diet, or meditation alone. It may be the habit of responding early. See early. Ask early. Adjust early. Preserve more choices. Buddhism does not ask us to pretend that the body will remain unchanged. It asks us to see clearly that it will not, and therefore to care for it while it is still here. Caring for the body is not clinging to youth. Accepting age does not mean surrendering to every weakness that can be treated, slowed, or better understood. And receiving help does not automatically mean losing independence. Sometimes the right support is exactly what allows independence to remain. The 74-year-old man from the beginning of this story did not return to the life he had before in one sudden leap. His family could not undo the illness or recover every bit of strength that had been lost. But they began asking a different question. Not only, what disease caused this? But what conditions need to be rebuilt? They found a movement program suited to his ability. They improved his meals, they reviewed his medications, they supported his hearing. Someone began walking with him. The hallway became brighter, and conversations changed from commands into questions. What still feels possible? What kind of help would make this easier? How can we support you without taking over? His life did not become young again, but it became more supported, more awake, and more his own. Aging is not the enemy. The enemy is the quiet loss we refuse to see until it has taken away our choices. And even then, the answer is not shame. The answer is attention. The answer is compassion. The answer is one wise action taken before the next wind arrives. Looking at your own life, or the life of someone you love, which quiet change is asking to be noticed now?